This is Atlas's first session with the hose. So obviously it's still cold out. It's March when this was filmed, but I wanted to get him used to the hose and water coming out of the hose way well in advance of the summertime because it does get really hot and I do want to be able to spray him off with the hose. So I figured I'd start now. So I'm going to use that start button just like I had in the other behaviors before. It worked pretty well, so I'm going to try the same thing. So he touches the cone and then I'm going to start moving the hose. And then he seemed cool with that, so I'm going to let him touch the hose like he wants to approach it. I'm going to let him do that, and I'm going to reinforce him for doing that. So he touches the cone, and then I kind of present the hose. So same kind of thing as a rope, and I wouldn't be doing this unless he was calm and confident with the rope. That has to be done first because to him, it's just a scary rope. So I want to make sure that he's totally cool with the hose itself without the water on. Having the water on is not part of the behavior yet. I have to make sure that he's cool with the hose itself first. Because if he doesn't like this part, like adding water to it's just going to make it even scarier. So um, I'm introducing him to it just like I did with the rope. He touches the start button and then I present the hose and try to when I do that, I try not to be as scary as I possibly can. So he touches the cone, I bring up the hose, he touches it, and then I click and reinforce. And if your horse is still afraid to touch it, they don't need to touch it. Just looking at it or stepping toward it, that all will work. And I don't do anything with the hose until he touches that cone. The hose doesn't move, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't get closer until he touches that cone. So that's how the start button's going to have to function there. He didn't touch it, so I do nothing. There he touches it, then I do something. So he can control me a little bit more, and he just seems a lot more confident when I can use this. So now I can be a little bit sloppier with it because he's seen it a few times. So now I can let it get a little bit closer to him. I don't have to be quite as careful as I did before. Um, but this looks really nice and he's willing to touch it. He looks interested in it. He doesn't look worried. I like where his neck is. I like how slow he is to touch the cone and to move his head away from the cone. He's still not touching it completely, but I'm not really worried about that too much. And then I've kind of worked my way down to the end of the hose because I do want to focus at this end. Obviously, that's the most important part. Because in the beginning, I just want to get him used to just seeing the hose itself. There, he's kind of investigating on his own. That's actually quite nice. Um, I'm gonna let him investigate. I think he's like he's like, oh look, I can touch it here. So I'm just gonna move it out of his space because he's looking for some reinforcement there, and now he can touch the start button, and I'm gonna start working on just that end of the hose. So now that he's cool with kind of seeing it, I want to focus on that end and then build up to having water in it. So first part is just getting him used to the sight of the hose. And then it's going to be, I'm going to turn the water on just a teeny tiny bit, and then he's going to see that sound, or he's going to see the movement and hear the sound of it. Um, and we're going to have to kind of work through those both at the same time. But I'm going to put it on really, really low so that the water's not too scary. So he's just kind of missed his target here, so I'm just going to wait. I might have to cue him to touch it if he doesn't kind of figure that out. I'm just going to wait for him. But he doesn't know how to play the game, so I'm just going to wait here. So I'm like, oh, can we go touch that cone? Okay, so, but this is good. Like, I'm okay with that. Like, that's not exactly the behavior I want, but he's not feeling afraid to the point where he's like not offering any behaviors. He's kind of like looking, seeing like what behaviors he could do. So that's a good sign as well. He's not completely afraid of, we shouldn't even get to that point, but he's not afraid and he's willing to kind of investigate. So that's really what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna start kind of showing him the hose on that other side. So now I'm gonna start maybe getting a little bit closer to where I can kind of touch him with a little bit since he's pretty confident with him touching it. So I'm just gonna kind of put that hose out to the side just like I did with the saddle pad and see if he'll just target that with the side of his face. So just like everything else, I'm just gonna treat it the same. It's just like a big rope. See, he touches it with the side of his neck. Perfect. This is looking really, really, really nice. And it kind of helps to do this same process with each object because then he feels pretty comfortable about it. It's like, oh, okay, this is the same as just with everything else. So he kind of knows what to do and what will be reinforced. And it goes more at his pace because I'm not picking it up and just flailing the hose about. I'm waiting for him to start the behavior. he touches the cone, then I'll pick up the hose, I'll present it for him. Now this time I'm going to actually touch him on the shoulder. So same kind of process I did with the pad. I let him touch it with his nose, with the side of his face, with the side of his neck. Once I kind of get to the shoulder, I'm going to start touching him. So he touches the cone again. I barely touch his shoulder. I'm clicking and reinforcing. So that looks good. Again, unfortunately, the sunlight is not in the best position and I kind of have a shadow, so I can't exactly see his facial expression that well, but I do like his head and neck um, placement. His neck's pretty level, so that's a good sign. He's still like interacting. He's slow to touch the cone. He's slow to bring his head up. His ears are still moving, so he's not shutting down, and he doesn't look very tense at all. So this is looking nice. And then I just kind of feed out the amount of hose that I have. Like you could see in the beginning, when I got to the end of the hose, I just had a little bit to where he could just touch the end, and now I've kind of made it longer. So two parts about that is one is I'm making it a little bit scarier, and then also I'm feeding that out so I can kind of stay up by his shoulder just in case he were to get worried about it and want to kick out or run away or anything. So safety and for a little bit extra desensitizing. So that's just kind of where we're at. And this is definitely going to be a little bit repetitive, but this is the real process. This is how I taught this behavior, and I could hose them off within, I think, 3 or 4 sessions. So, and they were spaced out. Like this one's in March, and then I don't think I did one for a while. But, so yeah, this is the process of it, and it's going to be the same thing over and over again, but this is how I teach the behavior. So I might end up fast forwarding through a little bit of it, but all of this is very important to watch and to understand. And I'm not going to rush him. I'm going to let him take the time it takes to touch the cone. And this looks really nice. I actually really want him to be slow about it. Well, I don't want like him being hesitant. I don't want him like not looking for the cone because that would kind of signal to me that he doesn't really want to participate and he's probably a little bit afraid. But I do like that he's kind of just gently touching it and then he gently brings his neck up. And then when I present the hose, he just kind of keeps his neck there. He's not bringing it up and getting really tight. So these are all really good signs. And I'm just kind of working my way down his body and just kind of letting that hose kind of touch all over him here. Obviously, I'm not going to be touching him with the hose like this, but the hose is going to be around his legs. It might go around behind him. I'm going to have to hold it up to kind of spray his back or spray over him. Um, Sometimes in different wash racks, the hose kind of goes above the horse. So I just kind of want to get that started right now. And he already has the prerequisites of being desensitized with the same process with the rope. So I'm just kind of showing to him, like, this is the same thing as a rope. It's just a different looking rope. So it's actually possibly a little bit less scary than the rope at this point since there's no water because it doesn't move as much as a rope. It's a little bit stiffer, a little bit heavier. So it's probably a little bit less scary. And once I turn the water on, that's probably going to change, but at this point, I think so. So I'm going to do that same process on the other side. So I'm probably going to fast forward through this point or cut this part out a little bit of it because obviously you can't see the other side, but I'm going to do the exact same thing on both sides of the horse. So now I'm going to be moving the length of the hose away from him. So I want him to touch that cone and then I pull a lot of it away from him. And then in a second, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to pull it toward him because that's what's most commonly going to be happening when I'm bathing him or hosing him off. But right now, I'm going to start going away so that I can build a little bit of confidence. So same process. I wait for him to touch the cone, and then I pull a big length of the hose away from him. A little bit hard to see, but you can kind of tell, like kind of through his legs there, what I'm doing. So I do the same thing kind of on the other side. So wait for him to touch his cone, pull the length of the hose away from him. And you can tell his body language is a little bit more worried, so he's a little bit more tense. Um, he's a little bit quicker to bring that head up. His ears are pointed at the hose. His head and neck's kind of held at a little bit higher level. Just little things to notice. But I'm just kind of pulling that hose away from him a little bit and getting him used to bigger movements with the hose. Because that's going to be a part of bathing, is going to be having to move this hose around and get him washed from every angle. So he's got to get used to this as well. But this is a little bit scarier than what we were doing, so we're just kind of building on the lesson. And I'm waiting, even though I'm just kind of setting up the hose for the lesson, I'm waiting for him to push that start button so that he can have a little bit more control over the lesson. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a jackpot and kind of give him a bit of a break. And then I'm going to set him back up, and then we'll work a little bit more with the hose, and then I'll turn the water on. In a second, I'm going to pull the hose toward him a little bit, and then we'll turn the water on. So I was looking away, so I didn't see him touch the cone, so he touches the cone. And then I'm pulling some of the hose toward him. You can see him raise his head. He's got his ears pricked on the hose. I probably should have pulled a little bit less of the hose toward him, because you can see he's a little bit faster. He's kind of moving his head from side to side a little bit. So I got to be careful there. He's got a bit more tension than he did before. So he's still willing to touch it. So he head up a lot. So a little bit more tension. And then you can see him stretch there. So he's kind of unwilling to kind of move closer to the hose with his feet. He's just kind of reaching instead. So a little bit of tension there. I probably should have worked on that just a little bit more, but I think I was a little focused on turning on the water. So I gave him a little bit of jackpot and then went to turn the water on. So now I have the water turned on just a little tiny bit, and you can see it kind of on the ground there. And it's just going to be a little bit of a trickle. And the same kind of thing, he touches his cone, just approaches the hose. That's all I'm looking for right now. I really don't want him to get wet at this point. That's not the goal. I just want him to see that water coming out of the hose, kind of look at it, be interested in it, possibly approach it, and then reinforce him. And if he needs to go away, that's perfectly fine. I probably should have put the hose down so it's not quite so close to him. Yeah, there we go. I need to be doing that. Putting it on the ground, and it's just not as scary that way. Yeah, that's much better. So then he can touch the cone, and then I'll bring it up. And then I'll click. Yep, I had to go back a couple steps there because it was a little bit too much for him. You could see in his body language, he was getting kind of tight. He wanted to back up. So this looks really good. So I kind of got ahead of myself there. Forgot to wait for him. There he touches the cone. I'll present the hose. That was really nice. He kind of wanted to come toward it, and then I put the hose down so that it went away when he approached. Then I'll wait for him, and then I'll bring my hose up. I need to slow it down a little bit. I like that. That's really nice. But I need to slow me like grabbing the hose and then approaching him with it. But this is looking nice. Good, nice. And then he's brave enough there to touch it. So that's perfect. Even though like he's not going to the water, that's not what I want right now. I'm just getting him used to the sound, and then that movement. So kind of same thing. I'm just telling him, oh, look, it's the same. It's just a little bit scarier, but same kind of hose that you saw before. And I've never taught a horse to be hosed using positive reinforcement before this, so obviously I'm going to make some mistakes, but overall I'm really happy with this lesson and he looks really good. Um, there's definitely things I could fix, but from the first lesson, like, not too bad. Not compared to what I used to do, for sure. So yeah, a little bit slower bringing it to him. And maybe I should have kept the hose a little bit longer so that the water was just kind of on the ground and it wasn't making quite as much noise and movement. That would be another thing I would change. But he's trying to touch the end of the hose while the water's coming out. So that looks really, really great.